Indiana, Dylan. 1-0, Dylan, Indiana. Welcome back to the Whiteout Report podcast here on a Wednesday night as we continue to trudge through what has gone from preseason, one of the most excited, hyped up, looking forward to seasons in Penn State history, quite honestly,
Yeah.
to maybe the single most disappointing season in the history of Penn State football. As always, I'm Marty Leap. Joining me, my co-host, longtime friend, colleague, cohort, however you want to put it, Dylan Callahan Crawley. And yeah, we're here tonight. Those of you who are with us, those of you who are still sticking through this to the end, thank you for joining us. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Send us your super chats. All of it to keep us growing here. Hope keep the show free moving forward. Yeah, so this weekend, Penn State, another not going to be an easy one. Last weekend, you went on the road to play the number one team in the country. You get to come home this weekend, but you play the number two team in the country in Indiana, who quite honestly has probably been even more impressive than Ohio State this year. I mean, I think without a doubt, Indiana, that win at Autzen Stadium, especially due to the way they did, was more impressive than anything Ohio State has done. So yeah, this is one that, I think against the Buckeyes, Penn State came out for the first half, played well. They fought. What you would expect for Penn State against Ohio State. Mark and I talked about on the previous show last Wednesday. They've always done a good job of getting up for the Buckeyes. I expected them, at least for a half, to fight and hang around, which they did before falling 38-14. But you kind of felt like, Mark and I mentioned this last Wednesday, as weird as it may sound, because that game was in Columbus, it felt like if they were going to win one of these two, that was going to be the one. And now with Indiana coming to town, part of it is because, Kurt Cignetti has proven – he's not going to take his foot off the gas. If he's got a chance to run you into the ground, he's going to do it. Yeah, so it could be a long Saturday for the Nittany Lions at Beaver Stadium.
Yeah, it's I really don't know what to expect on Saturday. It's kind of hard to it's just so hard to fathom where this season has gone over the last 2 months, and you want to believe that they could keep it close. You want to believe that maybe they could pull off the upset because all of the talent that was there in the preseason and at the end of September when they're number 2 team in the country is still there. But at the end of the day, this is just not a well-coached Penn State team, and we've seen that now for the last 5 weeks. And barring a miracle on Saturday at Beaver Stadium, this team is going to tie, the second longest losing streak in program history. It is still hard to fathom just how fast and how this has gone downhill so quickly for Penn State over the last couple weeks. And yeah, I want to sit here today and tell everybody listening that, Penn State's going to compete in this game for 4 quarters, but I just don't see it happening, Marty. And I think there's a chance that this week is worse than last week for Penn State. And, you look at what was being reported on the X machine tonight about practice and how this was the lowest energy practice that Penn State media has seen in quite some time. And it is not going well in Happy Valley. And we talk about quit factor. I think quit factor may have finally sank in after the Ohio State game, which makes sense because this team was built to play in 2 games this year, Oregon and Ohio State. Those 2 games are now complete. They lost both in 2 very different fashions, and 2 very different storylines with both of those games. But both games are now in the past. Those are the 2 games that this season was supposed to be built around. And I think the quit factor may have finally sunk in.
Yeah, and this isn't even. I think coming into the year, had you said, "Hey, Penn State's going to lose to Oregon and Ohio State," you're going to say, "All right, well, they're going to go into Indiana. They're going to be 6-2. They're still going to have everything in front of them, right?" And so it's just the culmination of things, and we have seen better Penn State teams, much better Penn State teams than this one, lose to Ohio State and come out the following week and lay a clunker, right? Yeah. 2017 against Michigan State, 2018 against Michigan State. We've seen it happen. So, when was it? Drew's first year as a starter against a really bad Indiana team the week after losing to Ohio State, they damn near lost. Like it's
Yeah.
that's been a thing. And at this point we'd been saying there was nothing left in essence to play for. I get they can still get the bowl eligibility, but let's be honest, even if they get 3 more wins and get to 6-6, this team's not going to accept the bowl bid. They're not going to, because these guys are going to be figuring out where they're going to be next year. It's unfortunate that this is where we're at because of the expectations that were there coming into the season. You were one bounce of a ball away in overtime from beating Oregon, being the number 1 team in the country, in this season looking so much different than what it does. This program looking so much different than what it does. You mentioned the quit factor. I'll be curious too at this on Saturday. What's that crowd going to be like at Beaver Stadium, right? You have an Indiana team coming into town ranked number 2 in the country. You'd expect that place to be packed and rocking. But man, I think at this point, most of the fan base is more concerned with the coaching search than they are the product on the field, which is unfortunate, but I understand it. And again, this is a game. I'm with you. I think this is going to get worse than the Ohio State game. Again, Cignetti is a guy who will put his foot down. He has shown he's not going to let up. Fernando Mendoza is potentially playing himself into being the Heisman favorite and maybe the favorite to be, 1-1 in April. Mendoza has just had a tremendous season, 2,124 yards, 25 scores, only 4 interceptions. You look at the receivers they have, Elijah Surratt might be the single most underrated player in all of college football. Omar Cooper is no slouch. They can run the ball. Their front 7, other than the Buckeyes, is the best front 7 Penn State's going to see. You might be the best front 7 in the Big Ten, other than Ohio State's, right? This one has the potential to get ugly and fast on Saturday, and the quit factor is part of that, because if you fall down early, if you're Penn State, 7-0, 10-0, 14-0, you're going to throw your hands up and just that's going to be it, right? Because I think a lot of these guys too, they know. We've talked on here before this season where when you have seasons like this, a lot of times it's like, hey, young guys, let's build for next year, get those bowl practices in. None of that applies to this team because of the coaching situation, right? You don't know who your head coach is going to be. Of these coaches on staff, you don't know who, if any of them, are going to be back.
Yep.
It's something that literally has never been seen before at Penn State, right? We talked about the history aspect of it. James Franklin is the first head coach in the history of Penn State football to be fired due to on-field performance. This has literally never happened to Penn State before. Yeah. And then you throw in today's era with the transfer portal and everything. It's just something totally different. So, I saw a more realistic path to victory in Columbus last weekend than I do this Saturday. And maybe we'll see some history on Saturday. Penn State 25-2 all time against Indiana. Both losses were in Bloomington. The Hoosiers have never won at Beaver Stadium. I fully expect that to change this weekend. I will say, though, of those 2 losses, I'm still waiting to see the angle that showed me Michael Penix getting into the end zone on that 2-point try in 2020. I still will never admit that they got that call right, because they did not. He was out of bounds, and that was another call that may have swung an entire season. But yeah, if the Nittany Lions are going to win this on Saturday, I have a hard time seeing a path to that. Maybe you do. I think it's going to have to be a game almost the way we've seen Iowa do to teams before. Pull them down in the mud, forcing turnovers, running the ball, shortening the game. You're probably going to need to be +2, +3 in the turnover margin to even have a chance here. Maybe block a kick, something on special teams. I don't know about you, but I don't see any path to victory here whatsoever.
Yeah, no. You talk about that shortening the game and winning this one defensively. The problem is you just haven't seen Penn State put that type of defensive effort together since regulation against Oregon. And Ohio, I expect it to be worse this week, final score wise, because Ohio State, despite the talent, is not built on the explosiveness, which is crazy to say. He's even more crazier to think after seeing what we saw last week. But on top of that, they're not a team right now that is looking to necessarily run up the score. Kirk Cignetti will run up the score. Uh, he is not going to be worried about optics or anything like that. He's if he can put a 50 burger on Penn State this weekend, he's going to put a 50 burger on Penn State this weekend. And then, yeah, I don't see how they keep this one close, let alone win it. The offense has been bad all season. They had some success in the first half last week against Ohio State, but Andy Koltonicki went totally opposite of everything that worked in the first half against Ohio State in the second half. And I just don't believe that he's going to be able to call a good enough game to keep this one as close as the Nittany Lions are going to have to. It's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it is. And I think part of it too with Indiana, and like you said, they're going to put the hammer down, pedal to the floor. That's who Cignetti is. Also, again, to circle back to Fernando Mendoza, the guy might be the Heisman front runner. You're going to look to run up those stats, pad those stats for the Heisman Trophy, which you can like that, dislike whatever it is, but I get it, especially a school like Indiana, right? It's Indiana. You can say as Indiana, we had a quarterback win the Heisman Trophy and get drafted #1 overall. That's something that even a year ago at this time would have sounded impossible. Right. So I'm not going to fault Cignetti for that. He's literally changing that program. I'm not going to fault him for doing it the way he's going to do it. Right. But yeah, again, I think if there's any path, it's the Iowa, right? It's dragging them down in the mud. Like I said, turnover, especially, but the biggest issue is this defense, which coming into the year, you weren't super concerned about. And like you said, since the end of regulation against Oregon, there's been nothing there to give you reason for belief that they can do it. Yeah, some of it's injuries, but man, I mean, if losing one player, especially at linebacker, you're not even talking like your shutdown corner, your top pass rush, or anything of the sort, it cripples the defense as much as losing Tony Rojas apparently has to this unit. You were never built for success anyway. You were never built to be a championship unit anyway. I still think Jim Knowles is a very good coach. I still would like to hope that whoever the hire is, especially if it's an offensive guy, they keep Knowles around as the defensive coordinator, which with his contract might be kind of non-negotiable anyway. But speaking of coordinators, I'm going to circle back to Andy Koltonicki real quick ahead of this weekend. Like you mentioned, I mean, I know this is kind of a dual preview Indiana kind of debrief some things for Ohio State since we weren't able to come to you on Saturday. But I thought in the first – when the first half, what was it? They ran the pull and pin running concept, I think, 6 times, averaging like 7-8 yards a carry, and never called it once in the second half. They ran the first play of the game, and Katron Allen ripped off, 29-30 yards. It's just I don't want to say Andy Koltonicki was always a product of the Big 12 because I thought the offense last year, while it left some things to be desired, a lot of that I just chalked up the awful wide receiver play because the running game was very good. It was explosive again. At times, the passing game was explosive, especially with Tyler Warren. But just, man, what has happened with Andy Koltonicki this year? He has just seemingly regressed so much as a play caller, as a schemer, his feel for the game, all of that. And, it makes me wonder, A, why he hasn't been relieved of his duties yet, and B, man, has there been any coach in college football coordinator wise who has had a more just fall from grace in the last calendar year or so than Andy Koltonicki?
I mean, it would be hard to find one who has, right?
Yeah.
He went from being the undeniable top offensive coordinator all of college football a couple years ago to, is he going to have a job next year? I mean, it's hard to see somebody wanting to hire him as their OC after this year. Perhaps he'll be able to sell on this somebody that it was system, not system. It was he didn't have the personnel to fit the system. But I mean, at the end of the day, the dude's been just terrible at play calling the last, this whole season. Even last year, it wasn't great.
Yeah, last year there were some times. I mean, I go back to that Notre Dame game where, I remember after that game, coming on the post game show with Mark or with Greg and being like, man, Nick Singleton could have scored 7 TDs today, and they just, when they were scheming things up for him, was working, they went away from it. Like you said, there was times last year too where you sat there and scratched your head and just wondered what on earth he was doing.
And this was a guy who almost got a head coaching job last year.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, no matter what anyone more, because you know it is when a coach is hired, they were always first choice, right? They're always first choice. Rich Rodriguez was not the first choice. Andy Kordelnicki was the first choice. And maybe he's head coach of West Virginia. He would have done fine back in the Big 12. I don't know. But yeah, like you said, he was the guy West Virginia wanted last year. And from everything that seemed to be gathered, the sticking point was they wanted him to start immediately, and he wanted to coach through the playoff. And had they allowed him to coach through the playoff, he probably would be the head coach of West Virginia right now. And again, that's another one of those butterfly effect moments that who knows where Penn State's at as a team and a program if that happens. But yeah, it's just been such a fall from grace for him. And it's, like you said, he could try and pull the personnel card and that sort of thing. But to me, it's the fact his offense has continued to struggle so much after James Franklin's firing. He can't pin it back on that. And B, maybe you don't have the personnel to fit your system, but it's Penn State. You've got talent. And what's the hallmark of any good coach? You build your system around what you've got, right? And it's been so much of square peg, round hole with Drew Aller for 2 years. And I know Drew obviously is done for this year, but it's just crazy to think that here we are, and again, just the insanity that has been this season. That's a big part of it.
No, absolutely. And, even beyond that, it's sticking on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, this quarterback situation that Penn State has going into this week, and we haven't talked about yet. Obviously, you think Grunkemeyer is going to be the starting quarterback, but Jackson Smoke is still out. Beckham Kritza did not practice on Wednesday. It's unclear if he'll be ready to go on Saturday, which means the only other quarterback that practiced for Penn State on Wednesday night was Jack Lambert, a walk-on redshirt sophomore at this point.
I mean, sophomore.
But either way, a walk-on quarterback right now is your potential number 2 quarterback. And before they play him, they would probably play Liam Clifford at quarterback. So, I mean, Penn State's truly one injury away from this being an all-time disaster at quarterback. And, just when you think it can't get worse for Penn State, it just may get worse.
And it doesn't help that, again, this Indiana defense, I know people talk about the offense of Indiana, and I get it. This defense is really damn good. They made Dante Moore look bad at Autzen Stadium. They're allowing 10.8 points per game, which is third in the country. Lewis Moore might be the least talked about defensive star in college football. 5 interceptions on the year for the Hoosiers. He's got 3 pass breakups. He's really good. And, we watched him against Oregon. It contained some pretty good receivers. I don't think he's got much of a challenge of that on Saturday against the Nittany Lions. And it's the frustration of it, I think, if you're Penn State, because you never expected to be in this position. And I get Indiana has really, risen to become something they had never been before in recent years. But I still think if you're Penn State, anytime you look at the schedule and you see Indiana, this shouldn't be a game that you're going into at home as a double-digit favorite, feeling like you've got no shot to win. Most people, if you tell them, hey, Penn State and Indiana are going to play, and one of those teams is first in the country in points per game and third in points against, you're going to guess that's the Nittany Lions, not the Hoosiers. And it just, again, this could be one of the uglier games score-wise for Penn State at Beaver Stadium, in quite a while, if not ever, if they don't come out and have an effort and have a fight and have some heart that, I hate to say it, but I just don't anticipate being there on Saturday.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And like we said, part of that is just that Kirk Cignetti will run up this score. And I just, you talk about the defense. I just don't see an avenue for Penn State's offense here to keep this one close. I don't know if Penn State's going to get to more than 14, maybe 17 points in this game.
They wouldn't have gotten to more than 14 against Ohio State if not for Chaz Coleman, if not for a turnover. And again, that's where it goes back here, where the turnovers, the special teams. That's how you're going to do this. If you're gonna even hang around and have a chance, if you can get this into the fourth quarter as a game, that's how you're going to do it. That's a big reason why they're able to get into halftime as a game against Ohio State. I don't see an avenue there because again, I know with Indiana, I get it. People want to talk about the offense, but this Indiana defense again, it is very very good. It might be, I don't necessarily say underrated because I think the people who are, your big college football people and followers and fans, they get it. They understand how good this Indiana defense is, but it might be the least talked about group in college football. And you want to talk
Mhm.
about Penn State struggles a linebacker. Indiana's the complete opposite, right? I mean, you've got between Aiden Fisher, Elijah Holiday or Hardy, excuse me, and Isaiah Jones. That's as good as a linebacking trio you're gonna see in the Big Ten this year. Those guys are disruptive. They fly all over the field. I mean, all three of them are big in sacks, tackles for loss. It's just this again. This defense is really good, and with the current state of the Penn State offense, you mentioned the quarterback woes, where obviously you weren't going to go away from Grunkemeyer unless there's an injury anyway right now. But man, if he would get hurt, and it's the Sean Clifford show, it'd be nice to see it. It'd be the Liam Clifford show. You don't feel optimistic. And again, you go back to Andy Koldenicki, you almost feel pessimistically. It's like, hey, even if they're running the ball and figuring some things out, you don't trust them to stick with it. Right.
Yeah.
It's almost like he tries to get out in front of things in terms of adjustments instead of just continuing to do what's working and then adjust when the defense adjusts.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I have felt, I don't necessarily say pessimistic because there definitely have been some games where it's like, I know Penn State ain't going to win this, but I don't know if I've ever felt this way about a game in a long time where it's like you're going in at home.
You're expecting
Early expecting to get throttled.
Yeah, let's not sugarcoat this. I think most Penn State fans are expecting an ass kicking on Saturday.
And even in the sanction years, I don't know if I ever went into a game feeling that way, right? Because like you look at the games, other than that one game in Columbus where it got sideways with Urban Meyer's first year, second year, excuse me, Ohio State went 11-1, and they got mollywopped. I think it was 63-14. Outside of that, even in the sanction years, their losses were never blowouts. It was always, one score, 10-14. They hung around. So even in those years, you didn't necessarily expect like you said, I think what a lot of people expect to unfold on Saturday.
Sorry for I don't know if you can hear the rain that's coming in.
Yeah, I'm surprised you can't hear it here because I'm like 5 feet from my basement door and I can hear the howling out there. I wonder what that was.
Yeah, I'm sorry for the reactions. All of a sudden, sounds like a hurricane is coming through the neighborhood. My foot is on the wall here, facing the outside, and I can feel the wall shaking. It was
Well, it must be all of Pennsylvania then, because we're on two opposite ends of the state and seemingly the exact same weather right now. So
yeah, it's insane. But while you were talking, I was over on StatHead. Since I pay a ridiculous amount of money for this just to look up stats. Largest defeat at Beaver Stadium since 2000. Would you happen to have a guess?
Since 2000.
Since 2000. I will tell you it was early in this millennium.
I was going to say, was it? I was assuming it was during the 2001, 03, 04.
It was during one of those seasons. Yes, it was during the dark years.
If I remember correctly, I could be wrong. I remember correctly, there was a year, I think it was Purdue came in and just laid it on him, maybe a Drew Brees year or a Kyle Orton year, or am I wrong?
It was not. This a little bit of a hint here. This is a team that eventually was undefeated and won the national championship.
Oh, it was Miami.
It was Miami.
It was the Adam Talaferro game where they brought him out before the game because it was the first time back at Beaver Stadium since his injury against Ohio State. That's right. And they got, what was it, like 34-3, something like that?
33-7.
33-7.
Down 30-0 at halftime.
That's right. And that was very much a game where I think Larry Coker just had a pure respect for Joe Paterno, took the foot off the gas because that was, that 2001 Miami team might be the best team in history of college football.
Miami had 600 yards of total offense in that game. So I think 26-point differential, that could be.
I would be surprised if that's not surpassed on Saturday.
That could be surpassed this week. Penn State, for what it's worth, since 2000 has only lost 7 home games by 20 or more points. That's actually surprising. That's actually 7.
I wouldn't even guess it would have been that many. Yeah.
I was 2 of those came in 2001. They also lost 20-0 against Michigan that year. Penn State that year started the season 0-4 before winning 6 of the last 8 games. 5 of the last 7 games to finish.
That was the year they almost battled back to get bowl eligible, and then 2002 they went 9-3, and Larry Johnson should have won the Heisman Trophy. And then they went to the not the Orange Bowl, the Citrus Bowl, and lost to Auburn. But that was, those were some dark times for Penn State football. On field wise, it's never been worse than. I know you're probably just young enough to not really remember it, but that stretch from 2000 through 2004, outside of that 2002 season, oh boy, it was tough to digest.
Now, the largest defeat at Beaver Stadium, regardless of year, is a 40-point loss to Colgate in 1930.
Well, it was things were a lot different back then in a lot of ways. So.
They also lost to Pittsburgh in 1931 by 35 points. The largest defeat.
Probably still talk about that one day.
The largest defeat in modern day Penn State football is a tie between that 2001 Miami game and Michigan coming into town in 1997. Another 26-point loss. But out of Penn State's top 5 worst losses at Beaver Stadium, or at home, I should say, ever, 3 came before World War II. So.
Yeah, I mean, if you go modern era, I think based solely on score, this is going to have a chance to be, the worst loss they've had at Beaver Stadium, because I think it's going to get sideways. Now, I mean, if you just look at quality of loss, if that's the way you want to put it, the fact that, and I don't remember how many people watching, in 2000 they lost to Toledo at home 24-6. I don't know if any loss in history of Beaver Stadium is ever going to be worse than that one, because albeit that was a good Toledo team. That was one of the teams that helped Gary Pinkel eventually get the Missouri job, but it's Toledo. You should never be losing Toledo if you're Penn State, especially at home. But this one I think could definitely challenge that score record of where we think this is going to go on Saturday.
What's even more impressive about that Toledo loss was that they lost the week before to USC 29-5.
Yes, I remember that fondly.
And they also lost.
I think they were ranked 15 and 16, something like that, and then it's just they scored 5. They scored 5 points. I mean, nothing will ever beat scoring 4 against Iowa. But 29-5 is an all-time of a scoregami.
Yeah, Penn State opened that game with a field goal, and that was about it. They got a safety in the third quarter. They also lost 12-0 to Pitt that year.
Yeah, they did. I remember that.
And in between the Pitt loss and the Toledo loss was a 67-6 win over Louisiana Tech. So, those are some years.
Again, I never expected that we'd be sitting here November 5th, reliving the early 2000s of Penn State football and comparing it to where
asking, can it be worse?
Can it be worse? I would argue this is worse because the expectations weren't there for a lot of those teams that were there this year. But I think we both agree it's going to be ugly on Saturday. You want to see some fight, you want to see some effort, you want to see some heart, see some energy. Even though you don't know if they're going to be here next year, you still want to see the young guys play well, because if they are here, you want to see them develop and come along, right? Your Chaz Coleman's, Kobe Howard, Tyser Denmark, can we please try and get them involved in the passing game already? What do you have to lose at this point? Some of your other young defenders like Xavier Gilliam, Keon Wiley, I thought at linebacker at times showed some nice things against Ohio State. I would like to just keep throwing reps at him, especially as I think of your Penn State, again, not that the coaches are thinking this way, but as fans, as people who follow the team, cover the team, Keon Wiley's a kid from Philadelphia. You got to think there's probably a pretty decent shot that unless they just butcher the hire, Keon Wiley's going to be here again next year, right? So you want to see guys like that do well. But there's not a whole lot else to go over for this game, I don't think. We probably hear these last 3 to 4 minutes before we get to wrap it up. We can touch base on the coaching search a little bit. No, there's been a lot. I think you continue to see, between some of the things that I know you and I have seen discussed in Penn State circles. I know Pete Thamels talked about this. I forget if it was Russo, one of the guys at The Athletic, maybe it was Russo. I don't remember which one, so I apologize for that. That, it definitely seems to be smoke that if Pat Kraft could handpick his guy, it'd be Mike Elko, which, obviously would be I think a tremendous hire if you're Penn State. But you run into the issue there too of you've got the early signing period in December. And even more so than that, the fact there's only one portal window now and it being in January. Mm-hmm. Even if you feel like you can land a coach that's coaching in the playoff, if that coach's team is making a deep run in the playoff, you're taking a pretty big risk. Yeah. And again, to me, not even so much signing period, because if you go back in the portal era and the early signing day era, and you look, even the early signing day in general, before the portal really started to come into being in recent years, since the start of the early signing period, if you look at data, coaches who get hired between, the start of that season and that early signing period, that recruiting class tends to kind of be a lost one anyway. I think on average you get like 3 to 5 guys that got hit from it. So it's the portal that's important. You want to have your ducks in a row before the portal opens, not just for bringing guys in, but also for roster retention, right? If you make a good hire, a lot of these guys, yes, a lot of these guys are loyal to James Franklin, loyal to their position coaches, but hey, some of these position coaches, there's more than one coach on the staff that, if I'm coming in as a head coach, a Ty Howe, a Jim Knowles, Anthony Poindexter, Terry Smith, Deion Barnes, Phil Troutwine, a lot of guys on the staff I would be interested in keeping around potentially. And B, yeah, you may have committed to those coaches, but if you've been at Penn State 2-3 years, you've made relationships, you've gotten comfortable here, you've settled in, your family potentially has moved closer, right? You still have a lot of reasons to want to stay if you like the coaching hire. So that's going to be the biggest thing, I think, is getting a coach in place before the portal, which, if they do pursue an Elko, for example, I know you and I, Guy, we've talked about a lot that I saw today was on that Kalesi or whatever it is, not that you can put a lot of stock into this, is now the betting favorite to be the head coach is Eli Drinkowitz. Drinkowitz is the guy who I know you and I both think very highly of as a coach, who I think would, be a tremendous hire for Penn State. I think Drinkowitz is a guy who he's going to get paid between now and probably January 1st, whether that's from Missouri or one of the open jobs. Yeah, somebody's going to pay him. So I think Drinkowitz, obviously, a guy to keep an eye on that, would be a great hire for Penn State. And, kind of the elephant in the room at the beginning was Matt Rule, but between the extension in Nebraska and where their season has gone in recent weeks, and unfortunately with the Dylan Raiola injury is going to continue to go. I just can't see that happening.
No,
not even the extension. It's if Nebraska's sitting there at 7-5, 8-4, and Rule, just lost to another top 25 team. If your knock on Franklin was, hey, you're not winning enough against the top 10, you're not going to be able to sell to people hiring a coach who can't even win against the top 25. Right. I think James, when playing teams ranked 11 through 25, I think he was around a 500 coach, maybe even slightly over. It was that top 10 bugaboo that killed him. So you're not going to be able to sell that one. But I'm not going to say we're in the stretch run of this coaching hire. I think we're definitely, probably in that back third, though, because now that you're into November, I think in a dream scenario, ideal scenario, you'd like to have a coach in place probably the week after Thanksgiving as the regular season wraps up. Again, a lot of that's going to hinge on where seasons are going for the coaches, but just based off things you and I have seen and heard in Penn State circles, based off what the national media guys who obviously are tied in and tuned in with agents and things of that nature have reported. Elko, Drinkowitz, I think definitely two names to watch. Brian Hartline's one that you kind of keep seeing sprinkled in here and there, but I think Pat Kraft is only going to go the coordinator route if he can't pluck a sitting head coach. I have said for a few weeks now, if I had to take a guess, I would bet. Not that I feel necessarily comfortable or confident. I would bet it landing on Drinkowitz just because I think of the boxes that Pat Kraft seemingly wants checked, combined with being a realistic hire to be in here before signing day in the portal, Drinkowitz probably the best mix of that. But we'll see what occurs because these next 2 to 3, 4 weeks should be pretty crazy on this front.
Yeah, absolutely. You said it all really well there. For those who have access to whatever sites to follow this search, I think everybody would agree at this point that the search, I feel like the likely next coach of Penn State football has been mentioned on.
Yes, I agree.
Has been mentioned at this point, not necessarily by us, but on the pay sites. And I think we can also agree that this has tiered itself out quite well. Not quite well. Well, it's tiered itself out quite well in the idea that I think we have a pretty good idea who the top 3-4 candidates are for the job, who the B level candidates are, and then who the C level candidates / wild cards are. And yeah, the A level candidates are going to be the guys that are going to be really tough to grab, and there's a good chance Penn State doesn't get any of those guys because of, maybe their seasons go too long. Maybe they win a national championship. Maybe they get a big raise from their current program. So for many reasons, those A level guys may not happen, but that B level tier does have a lot of intriguing names. I think you could throw Eli Drinkwitz into that B level tier. He's definitely not one of those top 3-4 guys for Pat Kraft right now, but he's definitely amongst the leaders in the clubhouse, I think, for the job. And there's been other names that have emerged in recent days and weeks for the job, including Brent Key and Clark Lee. Will either of those guys get the job? I lean towards no, but it's very well possible that Penn State has to settle for a guy like one of those, which I think would be a good hire, but it sure as hell isn't as sexy as hiring a Mike Elko or a Eli Drinkwitz even.
No. Yeah, and one thing I will mention with Brent Key, I know you and I have talked about this too in some group chats and stuff. I will say, I think with the dude's relentless.
Yeah.
If you gave him Penn State's resources, I think that could be a great match. Coaches, agents, everybody, ADs, they know people follow this. But in the world of flight tracker season, I'm sure people saw it yesterday on social media, the flight from State College to, I forget which airport it was, but somewhere outside of Atlanta. Georgia Tech's on a bye week. People are going to try and connect some dots there. But yeah, I think Key is a guy who would intrigue. Again, he's not a sexy hire, but sometimes it's not always the sexy hire, right? Now, again, like you said with Key, does he leave? He's a Georgia Tech alum. I tend to be of the train of thought that if Key leaves Georgia Tech, it's for a bigger job in the South, just because that's where he's from.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that would be a good hire. I think his work ethic with Penn State's resources could do really well. But again, like I said, if I had to place a bet, and I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable with it, but if I had to place a bet, I think I'd bet Drinkwitz. But again, something that's going to hinge to what happens with Florida, what happens to LSU, if one of them make a run at him, but part of it could be with too, if you're Drinkwitz, do you maybe, and some other coaches that we've mentioned as well, right? Do you view Penn State? Hey, Penn State, I personally think it's a slightly better job than Florida. Not nearly as good of a job. I think LSU's the best job in the country. But do you maybe see an easier path to the playoff and in turn a potential national championship at Penn State than you do at any school in the SEC because, the Big Ten doesn't have the overall depth of the SEC. Right?
And even beyond that, just for Penn State and Florida jobs, what could end up being a big factor is the stability at Florida above the head coach is terrible.
And not even so, is Scott Strickland really going to be the AD much longer?
Right.
If it wasn't for that basketball national championship last year, Strickland fired along with Napier, I think that's very possible.
Right. And it's just not even, and obviously this, but it goes well beyond just Strickland. This has been a issue for the University of Florida now for 10, 15 years of finding stability there at the AD, at the president level. I mean, it is very, very bad in Gainesville for quite a while now. Does that play into a coach's decision? I mean, that could very well
could.
And now, but the same thing could also be said. I mean, at LSU,
the governor stepping and firing people.
I mean, at LSU, you have so many different hands in the proverbial cookie jar. Somebody's going to take the job because it's LSU, and it's one of the best jobs in America. But do you really want to step into that position where you're not just answering the AD, you're answering the AD, the school president, and the governor of the state? These are things you don't really think about. Penn State, not, it's not perfect above the head coach of Pat Kraft, but there's a little bit more stability there. You just have to put up with some annoying, board of trustee members along the way, and but who doesn't? So I think it's going to be interesting to see if the stability at the AD and president positions maybe helps Penn State here more than or how much does that instability at Florida hurt the Gators?
Yeah, no, I agree because I mean, by all accounts, James Franklin always felt that once he got Pat Kraft, once he got Neely in as the president, that that alignment and that support was there. That was never there before. You don't see Josh Shapiro over here popping off about the situation of Penn State football. Like if you long as you can deal with, just two specific knuckleheads on the board of trustees, and if you follow Penn State, you'd know who we're talking about.
Hey, I know.
One of which still owes the university a lot of money for slapping his name on some things they never reimbursed them for. But anyway, as long as you can deal with those two, you'll be just fine.
And hey, when it came to that alignment, Franklin was right. The alignment was there. It was also perfectly aligned for them to agree that it was time to move on. So it kind of backfired on him in that sense. But the alignment was certainly there. But yeah, I think Penn State's still one of the top. I think it's the second best job on the market right now.
Third at worst. It's better than Auburn. The only one to tell you Auburn's a better job than Penn State for so many reasons. It is not. You want to talk about dysfunction behind the scenes? I'll show you Auburn, Alabama.
Here's the other thing. For while Penn State may not have all the amenities as Florida or LSU, the one thing it does have over Auburn is that Penn State will never be the number 2 in the state.
Yep.
They'll never be
you're never going to be anything but the number 1 in the entire region.
Right.
So, but anyway,
I think we touched on enough here.
Yes. I was going to say, I said these last 3 or 4 minutes about 10 minutes ago. So those of you stuck with us, thank you very much. For Dylan, I'm Marty. We'll be back Saturday after the game to wrap things up. Hopefully it's Penn State pulling off a massive upset. Never thought I'd be sitting here saying, let's hope Penn State can pull off the shocking upset of beating Indiana in football. But here we are. So hopefully the Nittany Lions come out, have a good showing Saturday. We'll be here afterward. Big noon on Fox. We'll talk to you guys on Saturday. Thank you as always for being here.